We want to focus, though, for just a minute on Portland police. They again declared a riot last night. They made arrests like the one you're seeing here, the officer running to, then tackling and punching that person down on the ground there. Portland police tell us they're reviewing this video and the use of force that you saw there to determine if it meets their standards. Again, that video was from a few hours ago. It was from last night, but it's nearly indistinguishable from most nights, I think, over the past 3 months. I talked to a criminal law professor from Oregon State University who has studied these protests and many just like them. And we talked a lot about the police response and some of the tactics that they use. You can find the first part of our interview on the KGW YouTube channel right now. But tonight, I want to show you the part of our discussion over how police manage dueling protests, like the ones we have seen over the past few weekends.
There is a lot of debate and concern right now about the treatment that police give to various ideological sides here, whether they be a right-wing identified group such as the Proud Boys or Patriot Prayer, and then people who identify on the left, which right now categorically have been people who would be described as Antifa or somebody involved in any Black Lives Matter movement. How do you look at the differences in the ways that police handled the skirmish and the fighting between those two different sides that happened over the weekend, last weekend, and the way that they're deploying their tactics on a more traditional protest turned riot that we've been seeing on a nightly basis?
So to avoid another Charlottesville, it's absolutely essential that police know ahead of time that these things are going to happen. And look, they're right on Facebook, they're right on social media. So it's not that difficult of an intelligence job for police to anticipate when these things are going to happen. One of the excuses I saw for police not intervening was that they didn't have enough officers for one of the events. I mean, that's just inexcusable. It's not appropriate. You know these events are going to take place. You make sure you have enough officers there, and you have to separate the two sides. You cannot, I mean, I saw some talk about there being sort of, mutually agreeable combat. That's just inappropriate in American streets today to allow mutual combat. We have to separate the two sides. We know it's going to turn violent. There's no excuse for not having a sufficient number of officers there and separating the two groups and not favoring either one. The First Amendment, requires us as a nation to not exert enforcement activity, based on the content of the speech or the content of the protest. All sides need to be viewed as equal by police under our First Amendment. So you just need to keep the groups separated and ensure that they don't come into conflict with one another. Otherwise, we're going to end up with some deaths and really serious injuries on our hands.